welcome to another episode of Cookie Pocket. This podcast
Yes.
is about film. Today we will be discussing Uncut Gems, directed by the Safdie brothers and starring one Adam Sandler in a very polarizing performance amongst audience members. Today is a special episode because we're inviting our first guest ever. Thank you, Nick, for joining us. Why don't you give us a brief introduction, I suppose, for our listeners.
I'm the first guest. Wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
I hope to break the mold here.
Yes.
Well, hello, Cookie Pocket audience. I'm Nick HAWDON. I'm a recent college grad. So Zach and I met each other. That's how I knew about this podcast. Aspiring writer, director, filmmaker. Letterboxed at NHAWDON for all of you out there interested.
Excellent.
And so I'm very excited to be talking about Uncut Gems. Really, this is just an excuse to watch it again. My third watch. So
Yeah, well, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah.
We
hope
are
this will be-
humbled.
absolutely, anytime.
Yes.
Zach told me that he had a
And-
podcast, and I was like, and you haven't brought me on it yet?
We were building to that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Zach's a tough one to crack, but
Yeah.
once you crack him, you know. Alrighty. I suppose I should summarize this to some extent. This is something of a thriller, I guess you might call it, and Adam Sandler plays this sort of slimy character named Howard Ratner, who's very much addicted to gambling, particularly betting on the outcomes of basketball games in this. And he acquires a rare opal gem from Ethiopia, and it becomes this sort of MacGuffin throughout his journey to settle his debts, or not settle those debts, and instead continue to take the money that he ever acquires and funnel it back into his terrible gambling addiction, which has detrimental effects on his relationships with his coworkers and family, and ends pretty crazily. Big spoiler warning for those of you that haven't seen it yet. I highly recommend watching before you listen to what we have to say about it. But with all that out of the way, what were our general impressions and ratings out of 5? Did we enjoy this? Did we not enjoy it but still think it was really good? And what stuck out to you? Who would like to go first?
Well, I can toss my hat in the ring, I suppose.
Alrighty.
Excellent.
So this is the film that I give it a 4 out of 5, which for me indicates a great movie, because I think this movie is very, very well made. The Safdie brothers have, at least in their first 2 movies, have this really unique style where basically their movies are like 2-hour panic attacks. And everything in the film is built up to be incredibly stressful and everything's going wrong. I noticed on this watch actually that the sound mix is really well organized. So people are constantly shouting over each other, and cars are hustling and bustling, and drawers are slamming. And you're in an environment where you kind of just want to like put your hands over your ears and tell everybody to shut up, which really works to put you in the anxious position that the characters are in as a viewer. I do think the second act drags a little bit, because the second act is kind of where we're introduced to all the things that are putting pressure on Howie. And after a while, I think, since it is such a pattern of here's a thing that puts pressure, here's another thing, it can get a little repetitious. But the beginning, when we're meeting all the characters, and the end, where things really kind of speed up when he's betting on that final game, those are some really intense, gripping portions for me. So 4 out of 5. I'd recommend it if you enjoy movies for maybe their artistic qualities. I wouldn't necessarily recommend this to Nana. This is not a calming Sunday afternoon movie, but I do think it's a really well-made movie.
If you liked TikTok by Kesha when it came out, then you'll probably like this movie, because it's heavily influenced by the early 2010s.
Yeah.
That is true.
I like this movie a lot more than I thought I would. And I liked Adam Sandler a lot more than I thought I would. And I have an issue now, I think I've discovered it, where when things are so dramatic and there are certain actors playing certain parts, that I can't help but laugh. So when Adam Sandler was crying, that scene... Now, I'm not sure. It looked like it was intentional to be funny, especially as it kind of wrapped into the tattoo thing. But that would be like my only major criticism, would be that there was a lot of moments where I felt tonally disconnected, where I felt like I couldn't feel pity and also laugh at it at the same time for some moments. But otherwise, I feel like the best parts are when they're actually like speaking in dialogue and it's very naturally flowing and everybody's pretty much just talking with each other and there's nothing else going on. Like Zach had mentioned, the sound mixing, I think that was wonderfully done. But the actual moments where there's like a transitional moments, I feel like are either average or kind of distracting. And I feel like that's partially due to the score, because for me, I didn't really like the score that much. I could see how that would definitely be polarizing, but I mean, I don't know, it just felt really out of place a lot of the time, and I'm glad that it wasn't used that often, because the best moments are when kind of everything's falling into place and there's like, mini humps in the plot, I guess, mini climaxes as things start to unravel. But overall, I really liked Adam Sandler's performance. It's one of his best film performances ever. And I have very little complaints besides what I had mentioned. So I gave this film a 4 out of 5, and I thought the plot was really original. And in general, just it was a lot more intriguing and a lot more complicated than I would have expected. And I think it really came down perfectly. It wrapped up perfectly thanks to the pacing towards the end. So, yeah, 4 out of 5. Really liked it.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. I love, Zach, that you brought up watching this movie with Nana, because I've seen this movie 3 times. The first time was in the theater. The second time was right at the beginning of the pandemic. I had just gotten home, and my dad said, I want to watch Uncut Gems. And I said, Dad, are you sure about that?
Yeah.
Do you know what you're getting into? And he said, yeah. And this is sort of the rule that I have with showing my family films that I like, is I'm like, I'm going to warn you that you are not going to like this. If you still want to watch it, that's fine. You know what? And so we watched it, and all he said at the end of that film was, well, that was brutal. I still don't, to this day, know whether or not he likes it. But I love it. This is a 4.5 to a light 5 for me. And it's so, like, it's a perfect blend of this sort of like gritty 70s Cassavetes vibe for me, this sort of grounded realism, and then also just sort of the frantic ADHD assault on your eyes of like a 2010s hip hop music video. It is just like, it is this incredible blend of some of the most professional and tightly executed filmmaking I've ever seen, and just complete and utter sloppy
high school.
Like, it's controlled chaos. It's, the kind of writing that I feel like I wish I could nail. Like, it is truly just like the Safdie brothers have carved out a sort of niche for themselves that is like so unique and so clearly built on like some of the best Jewish filmmakers ever.
Yeah, I was also thoroughly impressed. I'm right there with you in giving it a 4.5, but very much tempted to give it a 5.
Yeah.
And I'm right there with Mitchell. I was very much surprised by Adam Sandler in my first experience. I saw this in theaters, and this was my second time viewing. I hadn't seen it since, but I'm really happy to have revisited it. There were certain bits that I didn't remember, and I was a little worried that I think I had read somebody else on Letterboxd maybe said that Adam Sandler, they weren't a fan of Adam Sandler, and I think they were complaining that he was like shouting the whole time, and that they found his performance to be one-dimensional. And I read that, and this was before I had started watching the movie, and I read that and I thought, oh, he does shout a lot of the time. Oh no, am I going to realize that he's not that good? And no, that's not what happened at all. I found that the little moments where he isn't shouting are what really complement and make his presentation whole. And I want to bring back the crying scene Mitchell mentioned too, because I do think that's meant to be a sort of comedic whilst dramatic moment, and I think the tattoo definitely like points it in the comedic direction. And that scene probably encompasses the best the sort of grotesque nature of Howard Ratner. Grotesque meaning that you are repulsed by him, but you also pity him. Yeah. And you might find his pain funny, but you also find it tremendously difficult to experience with him.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that's really hard to balance. And there's already a sort of hurdle to overcome when you cast Adam Sandler, I think, because his reputation is being in these movies like Big Daddy and Billy Madison. and that I didn't feel that was hanging over him at all in this performance. I think that's very, very quickly overcome. And then those expectations are exceeded even further by his performance.
What I would like to just interject is I think Adam Sandler is a very tactful cast in this movie, and in most movies where he plays a dramatic role, because at least I find that most films where he gives a surprisingly really good dramatic performance are films where he kind of plays a typical Adam Sandler character, but it's viewed through a more dramatic lens. Like Howard Ratner is a character that could potentially show up in a typical Adam Sandler comedy, but he'd be viewed very differently. He'd be the funny, wacky friend, and here he's viewed in a way that kind of person would likely be seen in real life, where they're just sort of sad and pathetic and constantly sabotaging their own life.
Yeah.
I was going to interject something similar. I was going to say that I feel like the writing is really a big part of him being malleable, I guess. I feel like he's not like he's like an everyman. He's like Johnny Depp, like he can play all these different parts. I feel like if the writing is good enough and the directors know what they're dealing with Adam Sandler and know his best and worst and really understand him, then you can really flesh out something that we've never even seen before in Adam Sandler. And I think that's pretty much what this does. In a lot of ways, I think that's what Wedding Singer does, too.
Oh, kind of.
I want to put in here, I want to just throw this out there, that I believe, personally, that Adam Sandler is an unrecognized gem, one of the best actors of his generation. He just knows what makes money. He has a trilogy of films for me. Yeah. He has a trilogy of films for me, which is Punch Drunk Love, The Meyerowitz Stories, and Uncut Gems.
Yeah.
And I think that trilogy showcases that when Adam Sandler is acting in something that he knows is good, he is the show-stealing performance in that film.
Yeah.
Like, he is just an absolute black hole of charisma, and I don't think people give him enough credit for it. Every movie, and even I've watched a lot of terrible Adam Sandler movies, and like, I am still just utterly drawn to this man. There is just something incredible about the fact that every time I watch an Adam Sandler movie, like on an airplane or whatever, I'm like, this guy again? And I'm still rooting for him. I'm still like, yes, I'm glad he and Jennifer Aniston end up together or whoever. Like, and I think, that scene where he's just breaking down and crying is just the core of Adam Sandler. And it really gets to Howard Ratner's character in that film in a way that I feel like a lot of people don't realize, which is that the whole time he's like, I am so unlucky and everything I do goes wrong. And he's just crying and weeping about it. And it's this it's the long, dark night of the soul, right? And he's just like, he doesn't understand that it's not, a gambling addiction is never good. If you gamble, you will lose most of the time. This is not luck. This is statistics, man.
Yeah.
It's really just Adam Sandler crying about people not realizing his true potential.
Yeah, exactly.
You could see it as that, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I totally think he has that charisma gene, I guess.
Yeah.
Certain performers just have that where you're drawn to them. And I totally agree, even with his less critically acclaimed films. There's just something there that makes you want to root for him. And I'm not sure if I can explain it beyond that. A lot of people think that he was Oscar snubbed. I don't know if I want to get into the particulars of how much the Academy deserves merit or not. But quick question. Do you think he deserved the nom? Do you think he deserved the win? And maybe a brief why or why not.
I think, okay, this is a weird sort of like tightrope walk here. I was mad when I found out that he did not get nominated, but it is so much cooler that he didn't get nominated because now I can be upset about it. I can be like, well, the best performance of the year actually wasn't nominated, so, whatever. Adam Sandler was, he stole the show, so I don't understand, the Academy is stupid. And that, you can just undermine everything the Academy does now because they didn't. But I think it would have been nice to recognize the talent.
Yeah.
Yeah. I pretty much agree. I wouldn't give the Academy any merit.
Yeah.
But I think people can. I think I think there's a good subsection of people that will make this a cult classic in like 10 years probably.
Yeah, if not even now. I would say I'm also going to cast some doubt upon the Academy's name here, because often the wins end up being the result of who parked the biggest swag bag on the voters' desks. Yeah. But in terms of the quality of the performance, I definitely think he deserved to be nominated. Whether or not he deserved to win, I don't necessarily know. There were a lot of good performances that year, as there are every year. But I definitely think he deserved a nomination, because it's a really great performance. And I recognized watching this, I knew it was Adam Sandler, but sort of partway into it, I thought, like, if I didn't have this preconception of this being Adam Sandler, I don't think I would recognize this person as an Adam Sandler character. Because he despite kind of looking like Sandler, obviously, because he's played by him, he has none of those mannerisms, he has none of those typical kind of casual, like, hey, I'm a cool dad traits that all his other characters have. Like, it's a very unique, separate performance from Sandler's actual personality, which usually leaks into his other performances. And I think that deserves some kind of recognition.
Yeah, totally. I think he deserved a nom, maybe not the win, but I was talking about this with my dad, who watched it with me and may or may not have regretted doing that. Yeah. I mentioned the whole debate around Oscar nom or not, and my dad made this interesting point, which is probably true. He said that the Academy is probably just more inclined to reward performances that don't tax them as much. But then I immediately remembered that year Joaquin Phoenix won it for playing Joker. Oh, and I thought maybe not so much, but something to think about, I suppose.
No, and it wasn't A24's movie that year that they were pushing, so it was like, I'm just mad that it didn't get any noms at the Oscars.
Yeah.
Like, the Sandler thing wasn't even what really... I'm mad the Safdies got snubbed. I'm mad the score got snubbed, because that was one of my favorite parts of the film. I understand that people are, like, kind of off-put by the score, but coming from the childhood I had where, glittery synthesizer music was what I listened to, and I went, I want to put that in my movie. And then these guys just throw it against the wall in like every scene of this and Good Time, which is another fantastic film. I'm just like, yes, they're doing the thing I wanted to do. Somebody's doing it.
Yeah, I found that I really liked the music, and I think on my first viewing it felt a little more out of place than it did this time. Like, it kind of settled in for me more. But I totally understand where Mitchell's coming from at the same time. Yeah. And
I understand,
sort of
I understand. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I like the music, though. I also love that type of music in a lot of ways. Yeah. But I mean, I don't know. It just, for me, it didn't work as well.
Yeah.
I mean, since we're kind of talking about the score now, I will throw in my 2 cents here and say that I like the score, but the score does stick out to me as being a little kind of separated from the content of the film, just because so much of the film itself seems to be inspired by kind of those 60s, 70s, I like to call them walk and talk movies, stuff like Midnight Cowboy, where you've got characters in a really grungy setting and you're focusing on just kind of their progress through these streets. In an early scene, I think Howie even shouts, like, I'm walking here, or something like that, which seems an obvious nod. And the synthesizers and, like, the Albertus font in the opening credits seems so, like, cleanly 80s in comparison, which clearly they're doing a deliberate thing, but it kind of stands out to me as not fitting as much. I do think the inclusion of music, though, is really, really well handled. There's some great needle drops in this film. In particular, the use of Billy Joel's The Stranger, which is so well used. Yeah.
Oh my god.
Man. Terrific album.
First time I heard Billy Joel's The Stranger on Uncut Gems, I was like, oh, this is the high school. I was like, yes.
Yes, it's terrific, and we get a nice little cameo from The Weeknd about a decade before the Super Bowl, so that's
the best cameo.
That was. I just love the Safdies have an unbelievable power now. They've gotten Kevin Garnett to play himself, but like in such a self-aware, like
high school
way. Where it's just like Kevin Garnett agreed to be this guy.
Yeah.
And then the same
he's
thing.
Good.
And he's great. His performance is just absolutely fantastic. And I'm like, and then they also got The Weeknd to be like
high school
version of himself. Like, there's not one. There's like the one sort of cameo that The Weeknd has the whole time. You're like, oh, come on, why are you being such
high school?
Like,
Yeah.
There's a
like,
lot of.
He also like did his own his hairstyle from 2012. I was so pumped. I was like,
Yeah, there's a lot of stunt, like, New York casting in this film I recognized. Like, Kevin Garnett and The Weeknd are kind of obvious, like, big personality casts. But in addition, like, the guy at the end that Julia gives the money to and then he takes it to her in the limo, like, that's... I only found this out recently, but that guy is, like, apparently he was, like, a big New York, like, fashion icon in, like, the 80s, and he, like, designed ballroom dresses.
yeah.
So there's the impression, at least, that he's, like, playing himself. So it's very weird. Like, they seem to have this real love of, like, New York and the people in it, and that's kind of what this film is representing to a certain extent.
And the dad from Good Times. That was actually the dad
And the
from
dad
Good
from
Times. I looked
Good
it up.
Times, yeah.
And Lakeith Stanfield also.
Oh, yeah.
He was a way bigger standout to me than he was in Get Out, honestly.
Yeah.
And I feel like he was definitely playing a part of himself. And him talking to Howie Howard. Oh no, I said the tattoo name. Howard. Were some of my favorite moments for sure.
Oh yeah, I've been meaning to point out how much I'm enjoying the fact that Zach refers to him as Howie every time so far. So, thanks for drawing even more attention to that. Stanfield definitely does have this icy disposition where he seems to understand Howard a little bit better than everyone else around Howard that Howard keeps kind of screwing over. And he feels like his character is in control of that for some time and then just snaps. Yeah. And that's handled really nicely.
And you can
I think
you can tell there's a history of like between those two characters that it's like you know, like they play off each other so well, and I'm just like, that just speaks to Lakeith Stanfield. He never disappoints, like, for me. Yeah. Everything I've seen him in, I'm just like, yeah, he's so variable, you know, like the character he plays in Get Out is obviously, you know, he's like possessed or whatever. Sorry to Bother You. He's incredible in that. Atlanta.
He's great in that movie.
In Atlanta, he plays a completely different character than this. You know, he's very good at doing variations off of this one type of dude that I think I think he's got it down to a T. And yeah, like you can tell that in between those two characters, Howard and I think his name is like Amandi or something like that.
Damani.
Damani. Wow, I feel like a fool now. Seen this movie 3 times and I don't know Lakeith Stanfield's name. But yeah, you can just tell that they have a history together, that like he's been mentoring this kid for like a while.
Yeah, totally. I think maybe I don't want to say that this has multiple like subplots, because I don't know if that's totally true, but I do feel like there are multiple points of tension for Howard and the audience. Like, it's not entirely around his gambling addiction, but more so around this gem. But then we've got these threads with his family, and the gem is kind of the heart of it, I guess, because it's used as this MacGuffin, meaning this object that is prescribed immense importance and power, when in reality, it's not what every character seems to believe it is. Not even Howard, not even the auctioneers, really.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you guys, in terms of conflict and tension, did you feel that gem object was well used as a MacGuffin? Did you draw more from Howard's other conflicts? And what sort of stuck out to you among those multiple threads of conflict, I suppose?
For me, I don't think the gem, I don't think the opal quite has, it doesn't have the significance for me that I think it has for the characters in the film. But to a certain extent, that kind of feels deliberate. Like, it does feel like you're meant to think that Howard is focusing on this thing that isn't really as important, and there's all these other things coming down around him that are, okay, you should really address this first, or this, or maybe take care of some of these things. Like, the opal is not all that matters. But at the same time, I think Howard places so much importance on it that you do... I guess you understand to a certain extent where that conflict is coming from. Howard kind of has tunnel vision throughout the whole film to a certain extent, where he thinks of the opal as like if I can figure out this one thing, all my other issues will fall into place. Yeah. When in reality, it will kind of only fix one of them, and then he'll create 5 more issues as soon as that one's fixed that'll press down on him even more. So I think in that regard, you understand the role that it plays, but it doesn't seem as valuable to me as it does to the characters, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of his... you can go, Nick.
Oh, okay. Because there's just something so incredible. Like, the first time I watched this movie, he constantly is talking about how much this opal is worth, like in dollar value. And he throws out anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000 a carat. Mm-hmm. And the first time I saw this movie, I bought it. I was like, oh, this opal's worth millions of dollars. How could this auction house undervalue it so much? The third time I watched it, I was like, he is so just like trumping up the value of this opal. I'll bet it's not worth anywhere near as much as he thinks it is. And it's like, it's this incredible sort of thing where you buy into Howard's BS.
Totally.
That you're like... that you are sort of like taken for a ride. It's sort of a microcosm of his entire idea of what is valuable. He throws out huge amounts of money all the time. It seems to be the only thing he really cares about. So it's like this opal, and also it's this whole connection to like the sort of idea of Jewishness that is really interesting that the Safdies have touched on a lot in like interviews about Uncut Gems, that they're like, we wanted to make this an incredibly Jewish movie. And I think so much of the value of this opal comes from the fact that it's from these guys in Ethiopia who are Jews and they're stranded. And Howard kind of sees some of himself in these people. And so when he brings this opal over here, it's like, you know, it's so important to him. And it's like one thing that doesn't seem to be only about money for him.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah. But then you get to like the Kevin Garnett thing and you're like very clearly supposed to be like, Kevin Garnett's like crazy. Like, and everybody is just like allowing him to think that this opal is magic powers.
Well, that's another thing that occurred to me is when Howard first introduces the opal to Kevin Garnett, like he is dead set on like, I will pay whatever to get this. Like if he would just recognize the opportunity that he has and not try and like not gamble on the auction, like making him more, he would have like a solution to a bunch of his debts right there. Like maybe Kevin Garnett wouldn't pay $3 million, but I'm sure he would pay something more than what he actually ends up settling on later in the film once Howard's been through all these trials and tribulations and eventually kind of desperately turns to him to solve the problem.
Yeah.
That gambling thing is a great point. And that scene is, I think, in the first of many where you realize almost every time Howard expresses a sort of kindness or deference to the people he's talking to, he's either just straight up lying or trying to get something from them. Like when he first tells Garnett that it's up for auction, he's like, I'd give it to you for free because I'm that type of guy. And there's no way in hell he would ever give it to him for free. And there's moments like that with his wife and with his children, like this one bizarre scene with his daughter where he's like trying to compliment her, but what he's really trying to do is to get her to like feel grateful to him for complimenting her.
Everything is a transaction.
Yes, totally transactional and bizarrely uncomfortable and really well played. And I think that's sort of, it's interesting that sort of starts from the gem with Garnett and then seems to kind of spin out to all of his other interactions.
I think the opal is kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, because I feel like anything really could have caused him to be like this, because we kind of get the sense, especially in the first act, that we've kind of been built up to this point where he's chosen this lifestyle for many, many years, almost like as if he was like brought into it, like it's like a family thing, almost. And it's kind of anything could have done this for him, I think. And I think all of the relationships crumbling around him is kind of something that's been a constant tumbling thing. And like we had mentioned with Lakeith's character, all the other characters in his life are exactly, they all know what to expect from him, and they all kind of all of them are just constantly tired of him. And I feel a lot more bad than I do like want to criticize him because I don't really feel uncomfortable looking at him. I feel very close to him. Kind of what Nick was saying. You feel really like you're in his life.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that Howard, I feel like Howard's life is a lot more valuable than he will ever realize, and that's the saddest part about it. And you do kind of feel like he's gonna get what he deserves in the end. Oh no, Joker reference. but I don't know. I first of all, I didn't expect he was gonna die at all.
No, yeah.
But when he won, I knew something was gonna come of it, and you kind of just, it was just somehow this was going to tumble against him. Even with a point I wanted to mention was that most of the film is actually considering legal things. Like all the swindling, a lot of it is more legal than it is illegal, which is very uncommon. Like when we see films, considering high dollar amounts, there's always going to be crime involved, and the actual crimes are just him. The biggest ones are obviously the murders and the stealing at the end. So I feel like using the criminality as the climax makes it far more effective.
Yeah. That's such a great point. I didn't even notice that when I was watching it this time. But yeah.
What's hilarious? So, what is really funny is that it is sort of the narrative in Uncut Gems is at the end is that he wins and then is shot. Yeah. But if he wins, what does that mean? Like, there's no him getting shot was probably the best thing that could have happened for him, because if not, he just would have kept doing it.
High school.
Like, what's the only thing, like, this is a common thing in gambling, I think, that they say, is that the worst thing for a gambling addiction is that you win, because then you just keep doing it. Like, he still owes money to, like, tons of guys. His marriage is falling apart. He's going to realize very quickly that he doesn't actually love this woman, Julie, as much as he thinks he does. That he's just sort of caught up in the emotion of it. It's not quite the victory that it seems like on first blush, and I think that's what's so interesting about it, is that you get drawn into his hucksterisms, and you think that if he wins this bet, then that's it, it's done, he's won, things are finally going to go his way. But that's not even really true. Like, no. And that's just speaks to how well they tell this story, so that Howard is such an unreliable narrator, and that you're drawn into his BS just like everyone else. And that it's that you think that he's won, even though he really hasn't.
Yeah, I think Mitchell definitely had a point calling this. I mean, the opal is kind of the straw that breaks the camel's back, but to a certain, this movie isn't really the downfall of the character. It's about a character who's already downfallen. Yeah. And this is just him crashing and burning. But
he's been on rock bottom for a while.
Yeah, even if he didn't crash and burn here, he would have somewhere else. Yeah. Because, like you pointed out, Nick, which I hadn't necessarily thought of it this way, but he seems to think of the win as like, this is my finish line. These are the pearly gates. I did it. But he hasn't really, because even though he's done it here, he'll get himself into more trouble eventually. Even if he does by some miracle manage to tie off all those loose ends after this win, it's not going to last for long, because he's just compelled towards self-ruination.
Yeah. And it's like, he's very clearly, he says multiple times in the movie that he's broke. And that he's still spending money, fixing up his house. He's still gambling. So it's like, so Arno gets most of this money. And then what are you left with? A bunch of stuff that you're just going to, spend on gambling or whatever. Yeah. And
they never establish how much debt he has to Arno or to anyone else.
Yeah. No.
Which I didn't specifically realize until my dad pointed it out. And I think is a really clever decision, honestly, because somehow the idea that number is too large to be worth saying is a lot more frightening than if you could put like 1 million or multiple millions on it. And I think there's this one side character. I have no idea who the actor or even the character's name, but it's this kind of like shorter, curly haired man who's like
he kind of looks like
more
a gnome.
Sheepish. Yeah, and you feel terrible for him because he doesn't have the muscle that Arno and everyone else who's been played has to chase him down.
That is one of the funniest scenes is when he walks up and he brings a guy who looks exactly like him, and Sandler's like, oh, that's your heavy, isn't he? And he's like, he doesn't even say like no. He's like, yeah, this is the best guy I could get.
It's terrible, and it's to me maybe the strongest example that he's willing to take advantage of absolutely anyone, and maybe there are some instances in which he succeeds, and there's just nothing that these more diminutive people can do about it, I guess. Yeah. We're sort of reaching the end of our time here, but do we have any final thoughts, other things that really stood out to us, and just anything else we have to say about Uncut Gems before we move on?
When Adam Sandler yells, that's like top tier, like double S tier comedy. Yeah. They sound like this. What are you doing?
I didn't resurface anything.
That's all I have to say.
Yeah.
Excellent.
4 out of 5.
We did not talk about Idina Menzel at all, and I think that's criminal to not bring her up at least once, because she is incredible in this film. There is the one scene, and I promise this is the last thing I have to say. There's the one scene that she just dresses him down. Yeah. And it's like, it's some of the best cinema of like the last decade. She's just like, you are pitiful. I can't even look at your face. You are so sad. And then she does this incredible thing where, because he does his classic thing where he just sort of lowers himself because he thinks it's going to get him out of this. And he's like, do you want to, you can hit me if you want. And she like jukes him out and tries to punch him. And he flinches. And she just breaks down laughing. And then everyone walks in and just talks about how beautiful she is. And he's just like completely just done. He's broken. He's like, yeah, this marriage is over. Like, it is just like, in the movie where the romance is the center of this, that's the long dark night of the soul scene, because he is just like rubble after that.
Yeah. I guess, my final thoughts here, I think I'll totally agree with that, because usually I am not a fan of Adele Dazeem, but I think that she is, she's really great in this, and usually she's somebody who kind of distracts me. I find her singing voice kind of grating personally, but here, I totally forget that it's even her, because she's 100% that character and entirely convincing in that moment, and every other moment that she's in. She's entirely convincing as this woman that's just entirely fed up of this man who's dug himself into a million holes over the years, and she's just had it with him.
Yeah, totally agree. 4.5 out of 5. Yeah. I think on Rotten Tomatoes, I don't often like to bring up Rotten Tomatoes, but on Rotten Tomatoes, the critic score is in the 90 percentile or so, and the viewers' audience is like 50 something. So I think if you like movies, including ones that don't make you happy, I think you'll probably like this. Or if you don't like a wide breadth of movies, then maybe not. Yeah. But I think it's great. 4.5 out of 5 for sure. Yeah. Okay, I guess it's time now for the rundown, our little quiz segment. Thank you, Mitchell.
I wouldn't forget, Zach. I wouldn't forget.
Okay.
So we have a list of things, and we're going to say them rapidly in order, and Zach's going to respond with a rating out of 5 for each thing. And just so we're not confused, I think we'll go myself, then Mitchell, then Nick, and repeat in that order.
All right.
Okay.
Yep. All right. We have 60 seconds to try to get through this list. Are we all ready?
Yeah.
I'm ready,
yes.
Coach.
Okay. 3, 2, 1. Sports betting.
3 out of 5.
Being a correction and a mistake.
3 out of 5.
Getting excited over delivered package.
2 out of 5.
Kevin Garnett as himself.
4 out of 5.
Knowing that Howard just wants to cuddle.
3 out of 5.
Gucci shirt.
4 out of 5.
Not being able to be buried with Howard anymore.
2 out of 5.
Howie tattoos.
2 out of 5.
Fake Rolexes.
3 out of 5.
The Weeknd cameo.
4 out of 5.
Blade Runner synthesizer.
4 out of 5.
Bling Furbies.
3 out of 5.
Adam Sandler as Howard Ratner.
4 out of 5.
Trying to learn things on the History Channel.
3 out of 5.
iOS 6.
3 out of 5.
Being a very litigious person.
2 out of 5.
Just doing coke, nothing happened.
2 out of 5.
Not being an athlete, but winning.
4 out of 5.
Disagreeing.
3 out of 5.
Going to the neighbors to go number 1.
2 out of 5.
Adam Sandler watching basketball.
4 out of 5.
Howard's reaction to the stone.
3 out of 5.
Wanting the underwear.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
Can't give your rating for that one, Zach.
Nope.
Man, there's a good one that we missed.
Yeah.
We come back to these in the finale every now and then, so maybe it'll show up sometime.
Yeah.
Yes.
Stay tuned, audience members.
Yes.
Yeah.
Alrighty, this has been Uncut Gems. Do we have a preview for our next episode, Zach?
Yes. So next time, I'm going to be hosting, and we are going to be talking about maybe the most well-known and normal movie that I've ever recommended for this show, because we're going to be talking about Edward Scissorhands. So if you'd like to hear what we have to say about Edward Scissorhands, classic Tim Burton, Johnny Depp film from the early 90s, tune in next time. And Nick, anything you'd like to plug before we go?
Yeah.
I already plugged my Letterboxd. I'd say watch my film, but it's not available on the internet. So
So keep an eye out.
I'll pay you one opal. I will pay you one opal to
if
see
you
it.
can get a black opal, I will show you my film for free. I will give you a Blu-ray copy.
It better come with the digital code I don't use either.
All right, yeah, I'll give you an ultraviolet digital code.
Yes.
It expired in 2018.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
Oh, this
All
has been
right.
great fun. Thank you for joining us, Nick.
Yes,
and
thank you,
for
Nick.
your
Absolutely.
Insightful comments. It's been fun for all of us.
Yeah, this has been great. Have me back anytime, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. This
Okay.
has been Cookie Pocket. This podcast is about film, and we'll see you next time.